Now the fun begins.
Richard.
Stop! You violated the law.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Xbox Game Pass, and of course PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversation around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, review us, all that jazz, everything I tell you every week involving the show, wherever you get the show at. If we're not on the place that you usually, your favorite podcast platform, let me know. We'll get on there, yada, yada, you know. And, of course, follow us on Twitter, at GPGC Podcast, to stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games alike, and our dope giveaways. I'm your host, as always, Travis White, a.k.a. Travlis, on most internet platforms. Joining me, back in action, my partner in crime, Mike P-Pack. Mike, of course, the age-old question. What Moses went up to the mountains and said, God, what do you want to know? What do you want me to preach? My son, what's good? What's going on? And what the fuck have you been playing? Verbatim. That's actually what God said to Moses. He was like, oh shit, all right, cool, that's easy.
If I'm willing to go that far, just because I don't want to get struck down by lightning. But I will say, yeah, for me, I mean,
I don't know, before you go on, I just fucking have the vision, or the fucking memory of The Rock on fucking Monday Night Raw back in the day, being like, and little Billy said, well, I do this, blah, 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 and God said down, Bobby, you do this, but my name's, it doesn't matter what your name is. Fucking Christ. Anyways.
Literally. But, no, for me, I've been playing a few different things. Played a little bit of Squad recently, because I just kind of had a friend ask me if I wanted to play that again, so I just installed it and fired it up, made sure it was running and everything. But I mean, for me, with my life, just like this past weekend, had to drive back to Pennsylvania to get a new driver's license picture taken, then drove back. Just been crazy, so I really haven't played anything in the last week. But
yeah,
you are probably in the same boat. This might be the shortest section, like opening to a show for us ever, but I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure you've been pretty busy too, so
yeah, I literally had, in recording the show last week, I even got like a few of the like comments that we'll get on like various podcast platforms that you could send in and stuff. Like I got like one that was literally like, you sound tired. Like that's all. So but yeah, last week was the longest work week of my year, like the biggest work week of our year, with college sports and whatnot. So a little hectic, a little crazy, but that also meant that I went, it's pretty much been since the last time we hosted the tournament, like this is probably the longest I've gone without playing video games, which like sounds like an addict type of thing, but like I don't have a problem. Nobody has a problem. Nobody's judging here, man. Why are you judging? You know, like, but like I went like, I think I didn't play anything for like a week or something like that. I think that was it. Yeah. Because I played Elden Ring that Monday night, and then, which I like fell asleep halfway through because I was like, oh no, this isn't a good start of the week. And then literally like the nights that I did get home relatively like early, I say that in air quotes, was literally like, man, I don't get it. Why am I so tired? Oh, maybe because I've worked like back to back to back to back to back, like 16-hour days, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, I didn't really play anything until like this past weekend, and I booted up Elden Ring and kind of plugged away at that some more. But really kind of been dipping my toe in and out of a few things. This week in terms of like stuff that came out, Game Pass wise though, I did want to play. Tunic was one game that I jumped into that I've been looking forward to. Mike, I don't know if you remember this one from E3. It's been there for a couple E3s now, but I don't want to. I mean this in the best way possible because the game's fucking fantastic. Granted, I've only played it for about an hour or so, but so far what I've been playing of it and what I've obviously seen of it in previews and stuff like that. Tunic, the Zelda knockoff that with the fox.
Yeah,
I say that in the most endearing way possible because it's fucking fantastic. But it's very much the Zelda inspired, I guess I should be saying. But playing that for a little bit, it's fucking fantastic. It's really interesting that how it's presented too, because one of the big functions of this game is it takes that formulaic style of from that you found in Zelda 1 and then most recently Breath of the Wild of, hey, here's a world, you're just dropped in, go. Figure out what's going on in this world, solve puzzles and whatnot, and you'll unlock the game as you go along. Almost, and even like Elden Ring to an extent, that very much exploration fuels the narrative of the game. And, it tells its story very much, at least right off the bat, of environmentally, because you're going through finding stuff. And one of the cool things about it, I think is really cool, is that you're finding these pages to an instruction manual for the game as you're going on, but it's and granted, like some of it is in English and whatnot, but the majority of it is in this game's own language that it's made, that was made up for this game, I'm assuming. And a lot of the things you'll find in the game, like if there's you come across a locked door and you go up and you interact with the door, it's going to show, like the dialogue box pops up in the language of the game. And you learn more about that as you're going through finding these pages to this instruction manual for the game. And it's very much like the instruction manual you would find in an NES, SNES game, like especially in Nintendo, official Nintendo developed one like Zelda, Mario, something like that, that you're getting these high detailed illustrations in it and, very like creative illustrations to show what's going on in the game and what actions do what. But it's really cool that you're almost being like this, what's the word that I'm looking for that's, I can't think of it. Who you study languages. I can't remember off the top of my head. But you're going through and really deciphering this world and its language and its culture in it too at the same time. It's just really interesting, and it's a really cool twist on the Zelda formula in a way, and even just adventure game formula that you're finding that really kind of makes you want to settle into it. It's cozy. It's a fucking cozy game, man. But it also too, it is a little challenging when it comes to the combat and whatnot. It's stamina based, just like a Souls game would be. And I really am having a blast. I'm excited to jump back into it soon. I don't know if I'll get to it tonight, but definitely this weekend at some point I'll probably jump back into it. And the other one that I didn't get a chance to jump into yet, though, that I did download was Shredders, the snowboarding game from Foam Punch. That game looks fucking awesome, and I'm really excited to jump into that. It's built more around the idea of like the culture of snowboarding, like filming and doing runs and like setting up spots and things like that. So I'm really excited to jump into it. I downloaded it, and then I was just going to hop on while I was waiting for you to jump on and do the show, but didn't get a chance to. So I may end up jumping into that at some point tonight, or we can. We definitely need to get a bunch of people playing that, because it's I think up to 16 players can play on it. It's on Game Pass too, so I'm definitely hyped to get in on that one eventually. But that's pretty much it on my end. Just looking at my Steam library, even I think I played one or two games of Siege, because you mentioned I reinstalled Siege, and I'm like, well, say no more. I'm gonna at least jump on there and knock some of the rust off, whatever rust I could have, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I have been playing a bit of Siege. The new team deathmatch mode is a lot of fun just to get into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't jumped into it yet, but I did want to. I booted up Apex just to be like, oh, I kind of want to play Apex. I have I'm in a mood to just kind of turn my brain off, and just shoot some stuff, virtually, that is. But to jump in, just shoot some stuff and have a good time. But then instantly, every time I boot up Apex, then I'm like, I just want to do some solo hot drops. I'm like, I can't do that in Apex. I'd much rather play Apex compared to any other battle royale, but I don't necessarily want to jump into duos or trios with randoms personally, most times that is. I like playing, if I'm going to play duos, solos, whatever, or duos, trios, quads, whatever, I'm going to play, I like playing that with people I know, just jumping into a party and whatnot. But outside of that, And then obviously Destiny just jumping in like real hot in and out. I've been trying to find something to like kind of sink into again now that I've had this time off of like playing games, and I'm like, what do I want to do next? I still haven't beaten Elden Ring, but like that game's just going to be one of those things that I chip away at for a long time because it truly is, like Donkey said it best in his review. It's one of the most incredible games out there, but it's a never-ending game, but it's also, that's a double-sided thing, because he's like, there was points where I was like, okay, like, I'm just going to go on the golden path because, like, I'm ready to be done with this. Not that I want to be done playing the game, but just the storytelling. Like, chop off 10% of it, maybe a boss battle or two here, and the game's a little more streamlined. But at the same time, that does play into what makes it so great of, oh, if you're stuck, you could just go do, there's a billion other things to do in this game. Go and, that is not, wasting your time or whatever, doing so. But, and then the only other thing is, I had to try it, which I didn't want to, but I had to, because it was finally, Epic Games answered the fucking one thing I've been asking for, that I was like, hey, listen, if you make a mode eventually, what so many people are asking for in Fortnite, where there's no building, and it's just the Battle Royale version of the game without building, I'll gladly come in and play it and try it out and whatnot, get back, like, quote unquote, get back into it. And like, I did, and it's fucking fun. Like, shocking, I was having a good time playing, because, shocker, you actually have to attempt to use weapons in a third-person shooter game. It's crazy, Mike. I know that, off the top of your head, the one thing you love doing is building in that game, so, it's just fucking, it's just incredible. Like, it's crazy that in a shooting game, in a third-person shooting game, you actually have to try to attempt to shoot somebody with a weapon out using skill, not just like, hey, I'm going to like turtle.
Yeah, I think that's funny, because I saw a person who wouldn't be a show without bringing up 343, works for Halo Infinite's multiplayer team. And he was crying about the no building, saying like, oh, I'm not playing until they put building back. Why would they ever want to strip that out? That takes so much outplayability and this and that out of the equation. And he was getting dunked on. So he deleted the tweet, blocked a bunch of people, didn't block me because I didn't actually respond on his original tweet. I responded on a quote tweet, but that guy was getting dunked on. I'm surprised he didn't delete his Twitter, because he was just getting embarrassed. A lot of people were saying, just fix your game. Your game's fucking terrible. You suck. It was pretty savage out there.
But it's funny to like look at, like, you look at Twitch, like, and granted right now, some of those people who traditionally play that, but Twitch, YouTube, you're seeing the people who like built that game up from a streamer and content creation standpoint instantly back in that game being like, this is the most fun I've had with this game since like 2018. Like, yep. Because it's something they've been asking for of, hey, if you want to make this game competitive, like the shooting feels great, the movement feels great. I'm not super sold on like the sliding movement and stuff like that yet. I think it's a little wonky, but that's all stuff you could fix. Like, that's not, but you take something out of that, just give people more options with these games to go in and try. Like, I could, like, and I think that's why, like, we keep going back to MCC a lot of times, because I can have such a customizable experience in that game in such a seamless fashion that, like, it's just, why wouldn't I? Like, I get everything I want out of that game right now because it gives me pretty much everything I want out of it. And it works right now. I mean, knock on wood, it works right now. But any other major shooter right now, you could pretty much do that. Like, I mean, there's how many modes in Siege? There's how many modes in fucking, like, just name something, like, anything but really, like, in Destiny, anything in fucking, like, even CSGO, my god, even CSGO has fucking multiple things. Like,
yeah,
it boggles my mind at times that it's just like, this is what people want. Like, it's not that difficult. Like, you gotta remove one thing, and granted, I don't want to say it because game development is fucking very difficult at times, but these are things that are very much like, hey, this isn't a ton of, we're not asking you to add these features. All we're asking you is to remove these and give them as an option for people who want to just play something that is, and you could make a spin on it on your own of, hey, this is, similar to, make it like, word it like it's an off-brand like DayZ or something like that, where it's like, that's cool, or PUBG or whatever. Like, have it so that it is like, I don't know, like, it's more quote unquote grounded or something like that and build it around the season or something like that. I don't know, but like it's not that difficult to necessarily do that and position yourself like that, because that's like, it's just something that people have been asking for. And I don't think it is. And personally, I want to see developers' visions and things like that from this. I completely stand on that side. But at the same time, too, that doesn't mean to completely alienate the people who play your game, who want your game to succeed and want to, you know, in a lot of cases, financially support your game in more ways than one when it comes to that, because they're having a good time, especially free to play. Like, I don't know. It's just a little frustrating. But yeah, shocker. It was actually fun. I actually had fun playing Fortnite for the first time since like 2017, 18, whatever it was. So, huzzah. There you go. Anyways, Mike, let's jump into the news this week. And the one thing I did want to talk about, a little bit slower news week overall, but there was one thing that popped up that definitely obviously interests me. If you are new to the show and you've been around, you obviously know how I feel about this franchise. And you were here for kind of my epiphany with this franchise a couple years ago, but CD Projekt Red, and I know this is going to be, well, yeah, water's wet, you know, kind of thing, but they have announced formally, in a formal fashion, that the next Witcher is coming. The next entry in the Witcher franchise is coming. And it will be, the big thing with it too is, it'll be an Unreal Engine 5, not the proprietary Red engine that CD Projekt Red is, you know, so familiar with using with Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk 2077, games that really kind of define that define that studio, and especially too with The Witcher 3. But it's really interesting that they went into this partnership with Epic Games, knowing that, you know, hey, we want to have as much available of the tech as possible, and I know we'll get into this, but like, just off the top, man, it's really not hard to connect the dots, I think, just saying like, hey, we know that we dropped the fucking ball with Cyberpunk. We can't fuck this one up, like, kind of thing. So, you know, that switch does make sense, but it's really interesting. And I pulled up a article from Kotaku to kind of set the stage from John Walker, as always, link in the description, but just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. Not a lot was given, but at least to kind of set the stage. So, CD Projekt Red have today announced, which was earlier this week, a new Witcher game is in development. With the current teaser, The Witcher: A New Saga Begins, the game marks a move for move from CDPR's own Red engine to Unreal 5. At this point, details are primarily focused on the deal with Epic rather than what players might expect from a new Witcher. Calling this a, quote, exciting moment, CDPR explains this marks the quote, beginning of a multi-year strategic partnership with Epic Games, adding that, quote, it covers not only licensing, but technical development of Unreal Engine 5. The reason for this, they say, is to help the next version of Epic's ubiquitous engine to be tailored for, quote, open world experiences. It's already been an extraordinary 7 years since the release of the last full Witcher game, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, despite the game's regular updates and perennial appeal, making it feel as though it's hardly been away. Today's announcement offers no hints to when this new saga might start, explaining that there are, quote, no future details regarding the game, such as development timeframes or release dates. We know CDPR were working on a new single-player game as long as 2020, but at that point it hadn't been confirmed if it might be more Witcher, Cyberpunk, or even a new whole franchise. It's safe to assume CEO Adam Kaczynski was then talking about this new Witcher, since the developer has historically never split its large team between more than 2 mega projects at a time. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was, of course, developed under some pretty tough conditions, which CDPR made some vague apologies about. But it's worth noting, it also promised it wouldn't be repeated for Cyberpunk, and that didn't go so well. Hopefully, this studio focuses on the next big project. They mean it this time. So it's really, like I said, we don't obviously know a lot about this game. We know that we're getting a new Witcher game. Obviously, you can see by the thumbnail, the image on the video section of the show this week. That is the one teaser image they put out, which is basically a Witcher medallion in snow. Obviously, snow, or a cinematic screenshot that was rendered out using what we believe to be obviously Unreal Engine 5 now with this. But we obviously have no idea if this is another entry in, almost in a way of a Halo series, or Halo, where, there's obviously a split between trilogies where 1 through 3 were supposed to be one trilogy or one saga of games, and obviously 4, 5, and 6 were supposed to be another storyline of games in a sense. But I think it's pretty safe to say, at least somebody who's obviously played the game, or who has played The Witcher 3 at least until the end and knows what happens on both sides of the ending, good, bad, and different, that you do get by playing that game. It's definitely pretty clear to me, in a sense at least, that this game will not be centered around Geralt. One being, it's a different medallion that is shown in the snow. I think that's a dead giveaway. Obviously could be a throw off of that, and I believe CDPR actually confirmed that it is like a Lynx. Let me see. Yeah, from Eurogamer, CDPR confirms new Witcher medallion is a Lynx, so obviously it's not Geralt's White Wolf one. So there's a lot to be kind of questioned with this. My big question, Mike, that kind of sets me up for this, and so many people kind of raise the question of, Cyberpunk, and that's kind of the first thing on everyone's mind. Do you think something like this would have happened, this partnership with Epic, for mostly tech, from what it sounds like? They said there's no exclusivity with the game. They've already come out and said that, and who knows, that may change. But given the fact that they own GOG, they're going to want to put it on their own platform. Like, I'm pretty sure they'll be like, nah, we'll keep it at that, if anything. But do you think if Cyberpunk 2077 would have came out in the state that it's really kind of trending towards now, like what the full vision of this game probably was supposed to be a year and a half ago now almost, do you think we would get this kind of announcement, this kind of partnership with Epic? Do you think this is, Cyberpunk really forced the hand of CDPR to say, fuck, we cannot drop the ball on this one?
Yeah, it's definitely seeming that way. I see a studio kind of reeling for the first time, because coming off the heels of The Witcher 3 and how widely acclaimed that was to be one of the best games that a lot of people have ever played, they kind of seemed like they could do no wrong, right? And then you kind of go through this you get punched in the mouth kind of by how bad Cyberpunk was. And there's a lot of reasons for why that game could have been bad, and I'm not going to get into, what went wrong there, because I'm pretty sure everyone can at least tell that something went wrong.
Right.
Going forward, I feel like this is a way to say, hey, we need to kind of maybe take some of the load off of our developers. Maybe, this is a sign of things to come. This is something that perhaps 343 should have gotten a hint towards. This is maybe something Call of Duty should look at going forward, that simply building engines from the ground up plus developing a game is taking a lot longer than people think. Look at Halo Infinite. They spent 6 years on the game building up the engine from the ground up, and it's still being, basically shit on by people on the Glassdoor reviews of the company in general. And there's a lot of negatives that happen. Look at, Cyberpunk and what happened there. If you have these games coming out that are not doing as well as they could be doing, because building out the engine and then coding the game and then working out the bugs. There's a lot to be done there. And taking away building the engine, while that may limit what you can do, and some developers, especially CD Projekt Red, might not enjoy that, because look at how crazy they were trying to make Cyberpunk. I think it's just more of a realistic thing to realize, like, hey, this is where it ends. This is all the more we can really handle. We need to go with a different engine, one that, Unreal 5. We need to see what we can do with inside of that engine and go from there, because I think From Software and what they did with Elden Ring will be a good reality check for people. That's like, you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel to, if your goal is to have X amount of sales, then obviously with Elden Ring, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. The blueprint's there, and you need to follow it. If your goal is to make a groundbreaking game that changes the entire way the industry, is being handled going forward, then you might need to start looking at, what can I do with this engine? How far can I push this engine? Do we have to make a new engine? But you and when I'm saying you, I feel like I'm talking to studio execs, whatever the case may be. They need to realize that it's not a simple 5-year window for you to completely build an engine, completely develop a game, and release it full of content. Clearly, that's not a feasible thing to be done. And even Call of Duty's struggling with it in every 2 years. And they're not even really making new engines. They're tweaking old engines, and they're still having a lot of trouble keeping up with that. So the amount of time that's being spent on video games is getting longer and longer, and that's making executives and people at the studio more and more frustrated because they want to make profits sooner than that. Sending seven years into a quote unquote money pit of a video game that you are only spending millions of dollars on and not getting any money back until long down the road, that's not a reasonable business model for people. So I see this as kind of a potential for what's to come. And to be honest, I don't know if I know whenever you get handed an engine, you're limited by what that engine can do. And unless you have a good connection with the people that develop the engine, it's going to be super hard to get something implemented into that engine that you might want to happen, right? Like, you might say, hey, I want to be able to do this in the game, but the engine's not letting me. Can we tweak that? And Epic might come back, the people that have designed Unreal 5 might come back and say, yeah, we can make that tweak, or that shouldn't be hard. But again, you're answering to someone rather than, having your own team do it, which for a lot of the game development industry is independent contractors who are overworked, underpaid, undercovered by benefits, whatever. But like, not having that freedom is frustrating, and I can understand. But at the same time, you got to understand that you're going to be limited by technology, or else you're going to come out with a game like Halo Infinite that doesn't work, that you need a top-of-the-line computer to run, and if you don't, it runs like shit anyway. The game sucks as it is, and look what you have. Now you have this mess that everyone's running away from it, like a rat rats running off of a sinking ship. Everyone's running away from this project. Everyone's running away from this product, and now you've sunk $500 million into it, probably more. There's no way you're going to recoup that amount of losses because it's already in Costco's bin for $9.95 or whatever. Like, the game's dead, your studio's dead, and look what you did to yourself. You made it way too hard on yourself for no reason. And I think CD Projekt Red's doing a great thing by just saying, like, hey, we're going to work within the limitations of this engine. Let's focus on building a world out. Let's focus on building a great story, and we'll go from there, which is exactly what Elden Ring did. And look how good that's gone for them.
Yeah. I mean, and even too, like, you saying that, like, it's funny, Infinite is technically right now trending on Twitter. And I know, shocker, we end up bringing up Infinite at least once every episode, but yesterday, Nick Merckx even tweeting, Halo Infinite was a flop. Such a shame, too, because the potential was through the roof. Should have incorporated a battle royale, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with. But in terms of at least getting, keeping interest in the game and whatnot and opening it up to even more audiences, sure. Would have been a net plus. More content equals more viewership equals more everything. All ships rise, adapt or die. And he's not wrong. It goes back to what we were kind of talking about at the top of the show. And it's like, you either adapt or you die. And it's sad that, games as services like that at this point, but no, it's weird to see that. I guess to me, it's weird to see that so many people are like, oh my God, they're moving away from this. Now, granted, we're seeing a lot of people also saying, hey, this is probably a smart move, because those who have been at least familiar with the launch of CDPR's games, granted, Cyberpunk was very much so a more publicized version of that, given everything regarding, the hype surrounding it after The Witcher 3, but obviously that's the spotlight's a little bit more on the less than ideal launch, to say the least, with Cyberpunk than The Witcher 3, but a lot of people need to remember there were a lot of issues with The Witcher 3 at launch. Granted, The Witcher 3 didn't have necessarily this much of this is the game that's going to change the world, or change the narrative of gaming around it kind of thing, the evolution of open worlds tag around it that Cyberpunk did. So it's a little different, but at the same time, too, there were a lot of bugs and issues at the beginning of The Witcher 3's life cycle. Now, granted, in a much different, place now, 7 years after its launch, and a lot of people, too, say that, like, when you hear that, 7 years after its launch, and it's like, because that game's been consistently, kept up with and whatnot, but if Unreal gets if working with Unreal, or with Epic, using Unreal Engine, specifically Unreal Engine 5, being kind of this, flag bearer for, hey, we want to make advancements in not only technology with this, but we want to help truly usher in, we want to keep that vision of ushering in new, exciting stories through open world games and immersiveness through them. It seems it's a very smart move to me, in the sole fact of they're cognitive enough to realize our engine isn't going to do that. Or, like you're saying, Mike, taking the year, 2 years even to, look at Bethesda, look at look at 343, obviously, taking that time to either, kind of retool your engine or make upgrades to your engine, at least in sweeping fashion. That's a lot of manpower and a lot of additional time that's built into that you could be, if you're saying, hey, instead of using our proprietary technology on this, or our proprietary tool set that's only built to work with the games we develop, why don't we use something that is being used across the board, that so many people have access to, and so many people have been improving long term on a mass level, such as Unreal. Hell, such as Unity even. There's nothing wrong with if you're using Unity either. Granted, Unity tends to be much more of a independent tool set that a lot of independent developers are using. But Unreal across the board, Unreal is the most well-known an advanced piece of gaming technology that is out there now at a ready fashion, at commercial level, that somebody can go out there. I can go and just boom, grab it right off of, granted for non-commercial use, but I have easy access to the technology, and you look and there's just a community that's built around improving this, compared to, hey, that also means instead of CD Projekt Red now having to be like, well, we got to bring, if you have experience, programming in C++ and Java and, whatever else, what all these other languages that could be applied to it. Sure, you may know all that, and that's great and everything like that. And you may have experience doing, game design within, this engine and that engine and whatnot. But when you come in, you still have to learn our engine. So that's still more time that you're bringing in new hires and even contractors or whoever to come in and work on this game as this game begins to ramp up development, each and every year that passes. That, if you would have asked me if they're working just right on, hey, the next Witcher's coming out, when do you expect it? Which they basically already said the next Witcher was coming out when they reached another deal with the author of the games and the owner of the IP, saying like, hey, we're going to make more content out of this. Clearly, they're making another Witcher game, but in some fashion. But, knowing this now, like when I heard that originally, like before this announcement, like, oh, I don't expect to see this game until, at least 2027. Like, but if they're moving to a piece of technology that is much more versatile, much more flexible, much more easily accessible, and much more open to advancements in working with a vaster community to people to update this technology as it goes on in this tool set, that may shave a year off of development. Who the fuck knows? Like, it just logistically makes sense alone. Not even take everything out with fucking Cyberpunk and all that. To me, it just logistically makes sense that this game and their games moving forward, the Red Engine was not working for them. Their in-house technology was not working for them long term. So I am happy as a fan of The Witcher, as a fan of CD Projekt Red, that they're cognitive enough to see that and say, okay, we can't fucking drop the ball again on this. We can't fucking do this. We can't, we can't have another blunder like this, especially obviously being a publicly traded company in Poland. Like, this can't happen again. What is the answer to that? So I guess following up with that, Mike, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of like what happens with this and what happens with Cyberpunk. But, with Unreal being this kind of hotbed of tech behind gaming and whatnot, and we're seeing Unreal Engine 5 especially too, with this game potentially, like I said, probably, I say the soonest we hear about this game is probably in another 3 years. At what point does it look like, games like this in general, these large, massive scaling open world games, at what point will we get to it saying, or will we eventually get to the point where it's like, these games are only coming out once a year kind of thing? Like, this is, or, hey, we're only going to get X amount of these games a generation, very limited amount. And we see kind of that, because it feels to me like, now granted, Unreal 5's made the technology and the tool sets that's available is definitely streamlining a lot of the ability to both move forward graphically and move forward from a mechanical standpoint that will help streamline and make these games faster. But like you said, even just on, massive games, third-party games alone that are being developed on, these very popular tool sets like Unreal, Unity, whatever. At what point, though, is this going to be the, we're going to have one of these, it's almost like an Avengers Endgame moment of, these are going to become far and few between because of the money and the tech that's required to do these in a timely manner, that we see more, we go back to more of a indie and AA space of, yeah, you're getting games that are maybe 8 to 10 hours compared to 20 to 30 hours because of the, time and money alone that is costing to, run some of this.
Yeah. This is
I know
something
that's more
that,
like theoretical and whatnot, and it's more kind of just, picking and prodding, but it's really started to kind of interest me with announcements like this.
Yeah, I mean, think about it in a right now moment. For instance, Ghostwire Tokyo just came out from Bethesda, even though it's a timed release for Xbox, because I'm pretty sure it's on PS5 and Windows only.
Yeah, which obviously within the next year that'll end up coming to Xbox. Same with, I wouldn't be shocked if we get to August of this year or September.
Starfield's the other way, right?
I was going to say Deathloop, but
sorry.
We get to Deathloop, or we get to September this year, and Deathloop is right back on Game Pass, or will come to Game Pass and Xbox in general. But yeah, sorry, not to cut you off.
No, and like that's a game that I watched a couple of content creators this morning while I was doing some stuff for work, playing that game, and it looks like something that's interesting. But quite frankly, after 51 hours of Elden Ring, now that...
And you're not even done, like, you're scratching the surface.
Yeah, and it's like, I might have grinded myself out trying to make the game too easy, and that's a my fault thing, but I've seen people fight some of the end bosses in that game, and how I've watched content creators stream 2 days of fighting a single boss in Elden Ring, and the writing's just kind of on the wall for me right now with my job and everything that I have going on as an adult. It's not in the cards for me to finish that game. I might never finish it, but I did get 50 hard hours from it, and it's very good, and I enjoyed it a lot. But nobody's talking about Ghostwire Tokyo. And from all intents and purposes, from what I've seen, pretty solid game. I know the reviews aren't the highest. I think I saw 7.5 on IGN. But, like, that's a game that's just completely under the radar because people are so enamored over Elden Ring, and for good reason. Look at a game like Halo Infinite. I mean, they killed themselves, but like that was supposed to be, for all intents and purposes, a Game of the Year candidate. Not my words, but like I'm sure that's what 343 came into this thinking. Regardless of who they were going up with, they wanted a Game of the Year, and it's just not gonna be that way. And the game's already dead, and for a lot of different reasons. I don't know that the same people that are playing Elden Ring or that are into it would be into Halo Infinite, but I know I'm one, and you're one, and Adam's one, so that makes 3, and that's a bunch of people I know. You start to go up against these huge Titanic level games, and now all of a sudden your game kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And I see games like Apex still very prominent, games like Warzone still very prominent, games like Fortnite still very prominent, and I start to question, like, where does a fresh game, and what do you have to do to get your like fan base to stay for longer than a weekend? So say a game like Halo Infinite, it had all the content creators' attention for about a week, and then you lost them. What did you really need? Well, maybe a BR would have made a difference, and I see a lot of people calling for BRs, and yeah, that probably would have helped, because just on the surface of just general content creation, people need something other than playing matchmaking for 8 hours a day to do. Right. And that makes sense, because each BR, the one thing, like, I might not necessarily love Battle Royales, but the one thing about them is almost no game is the same. And that's something that Battle Royales have going for it that not many other game genres have going for it. Literally, every single Battle Royale game that you play could be a different experience from the last. It could be similar or the same. It's much in like, it's like a infinite game of chess or poker, I feel like, because poker and chess can be figured out by bots, because like robots and AI, because especially with chess, there's only how many million games. I know how many million how many million different games can be played in a game of chess, but a computer can have all of that figured out. Whereas in a game of BR, it would be a lot harder to make an AI be very prominent or know what everyone else is doing in BR, because if there's 80 people on the map, each one of those 80 people have a different line of thought. They make different decisions. It creates a new experience. So that's one of the reasons why BRs have such staying power. And to bring it around to the point I'm about to make is like, how do you really make a game that can compete with Elden Ring? Because Elden Ring will die. Like, it will go away. And how long is that going to take?
Somebody already made the joke. Oh my god, like they showed the Steam numbers on it. Oh my god, Elden Ring's lost half of its audience in the last month. Oh my god, content is king, you need content, and blah, blah, like being very satirical, because it went from almost 1 million concurrent players to 450,000.
And
like
it's like one of those things where
a lot of eventually die off,
a lot of people were like super pumped about it, and even though you might have been, there's a lot of people that aren't ever going to play Elden Ring again because they were getting smacked by Godric, or they got smacked by the guy before him, Margit, and like, but they still probably got, like, if you were a fresh new player and you were typically not very good at video games traditionally, and you're more of a casual person when it comes to playing video games, people could have easily gotten 50 hours out of the game and still not beaten Margit.
Yeah.
Because you're just exploring, you're fighting, you're doing whatever, you're learning new things about the game, especially if it's your first Souls game. So yeah, those people might never play the game again because Margit was so difficult, and they might just say it's probably not worth, the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze, which is where I'm at with the game, with how difficult the bosses get. But like, at the end of the day, not only are games getting lost in the shuffle because of how great Elden Ring was, but games are getting lost in the shuffle because people are just going back to, because nothing's really changing with Apex as far as the meta. Nothing's changing really with Warzone. This is the first huge meta change that Fortnite has had as far as core gameplay since the game released. And how old's that game? Since 2017?
Yeah. So
that's why people keep going back to these games, because of the fresh experiences each game brings, even though it's the same core gameplay. And I don't know where you go to compete with that. But when Elder Scrolls comes out, it's probably going to be the only type of game that comes out like it, because I hope, a lot of people look at it and say, if Elder Scrolls is coming out in the fall of 2020, God, I hope sooner than 2025, but it probably not. Why would I even waste my time releasing a game that time? Why don't I wait till 2026?
Oh, 100%. I definitely think there is 100%, and you've even, I think, heard people and heard development teams, and especially in a creative director or game director position and producer position, that kind of has the ability to map out their release, from kind of the logistical standpoint of planning the game and whatnot, and especially too from a PR and marketing standpoint too. That, as we clearly saw with Halo Infinite last year in 2020 getting delayed, and all the Monster Energy drink stuff was out, and people were getting codes off action figures, and the game wasn't coming out for another year. Like, you see how that can turn. Yeah, I mean, definitely you're looking at, like, I know for a lot of, games like that, it's you've heard people talk about, development teams talk about when Red Dead was coming out. Like, no, we're not launching around Red Dead. Like, we'll even just saying, hey, we'll bump it, like, internally. Like, if we have to, we're going to bump it a month, or we're going to do whatever, like, just to get out of its way. Like, or especially before it. You don't want anything before it, like a week before. Like, that's why I feel so bad for Guerrilla and the Horizon team. Like, the Horizon franchise is fucking spectacular. Like, sure, it isn't my favorite open world franchise that's out there, but I love Aloy. I love the narrative that they tell. I think it's a really cool interactive world. It's fucking gorgeous. I love. It's an excellent, if you have an HDR TV, which you should, make sure you fucking, if you're playing it in 4K, make sure you play with your HDR on, because it's fucking gorgeous. The colors pop so beautifully. But at the same time, I feel so bad for them, because they always release around something. Like, in 2017, they released, I think it was a week or 2 weeks at the very most before Breath of the Wild came out. And unfortunately, that's one of the most anticipated games really at that point of all time in modern games. Like, and it's getting rave reviews and this and that. Like, it's going to get forgotten to win, and it's going to, obviously, when award season comes around, play second fiddle. Same with this past year with last month with Forbidden West coming out, and less than a week after, Elden Ring coming out, and Elden Ring really taking the world by storm. So yeah, man, it's like, you goddamn best believe that not only obviously Starfield too, but easily one of the most anticipated, modern video games of all time in the Elder Scrolls 6, you best believe that there's development teams on GTA 6, and hell, even with GTA 6, like, stuff like that, it's like, there are teams building stuff around, like Borderlands 4, and I'm just trying to think of modern game, the next, entry in the Arkham series that isn't, Arkham Knights, or stuff like that, like these big third-party games that so many people love and adore. It's like, I cannot get in the fucking way of this. These kind of games you cannot get in the way of. And that's even going to be the same with The Witcher coming out. Like, you can't get in the way of that. I didn't mean to cut you off if you had another point you wanted to bring up, but
oh no, that's kind of all I really wanted to say is, like, I just don't know where you go as far as, you just can't really compete with those types of games. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Right. And that's what I think it's just eventually going to get to, because thinking about that, it'll be really interesting when we get to this point of when we're talking about this new entry in the Witcher series, or CD Projekt Red's next game that they're going to be putting out. It's probably going to be within that window of Elder Scrolls 6. And I think that's going to be a big question when it comes to Bethesda, and realistically a big question when it comes to Starfield this year. I mean, this is a game we still haven't seen any actual physical gameplay from. True gameplay outside of in-game, engine footage that we saw last summer. And obviously, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that game very soon. And by very soon, I mean within the next couple months, I would imagine, with the summer game showcase. I'm not even going to call it E3 anymore, but the summer game showcase that they have planned, or the next game showcase that Xbox and Microsoft have planned. Obviously, we're going to get probably a better look at that. But, you got to think, though, depending on how that goes, it's going to be interesting to see how these kind of two games stack up, considering really Bethesda and CDPR at one point, and probably still are considered, at least mainstream-wise, the two kings of modern video game RPGs. Where you hear so many people say, a Bethesda world, nobody's really touched that in an open world sense with RPGs, just like a Bethesda game when you're playing it. Same with, a CDPR game and the dialogue that's involved in the storytelling and narrative, twists and turns you get. You very much can tell you're playing a CDPR game. So from that end, it's going to be really interesting. But I guess kind of wrapping up and kind of looking as we kind of close off this section of the conversation with it, I guess, what do you want to see out of this, Mike? I know you're somebody who's dabbled in The Witcher a little bit, but somebody who does like the lore of this franchise, I guess, if you want to call it this IP, somebody who loves the show, who's watched the show and, obviously gotten into it and wants to get into the games more. I guess, what are you looking for that really you want to see out of, I guess, really, and this could be just open world RPGs in general moving forward, as we're now fully into quote unquote the next gen, console life cycle. We're in the new current gen now. What are you wanting out of this next generation of RPGs, like we're going to get potentially with a Starfield, an Elder Scrolls 6, and obviously with the show talking about this week, The Witcher 4, or the next Witcher we're going to see?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you're starting to run out of, new wrinkles you can bring into games.
Yeah, mechanically and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like the best case would probably be to go forward with more NPC relationships, not even romance or anything of that nature. I don't mean like that, but I mean I feel like, you're getting to the point where people kind of love to shit on the Oblivion game where you kind of use speechcraft to get people to like you so you could get better prices or whatever.
Hey, but what? You bringing that up, I fucking forgot to bring it up last week on the show, because I think I saw it last week. But fucking guess what's coming back to Starfield? That whole game? The fucking mini game that you got whenever you're interacting and you're trying to manipulate emotions with NPCs. A version of that, not directly, but it's inspired by it. Bethesda even confirmed that, in a dev diary kind of thing that they were talking about, that I believe it was one of their senior designers said that they take very much heavy inspiration from Oblivion's verbatim Oblivion's NPC interaction minigame, which is fucking incredible.
Yeah,
let that sink it.
It's definitely something pretty crazy. I would just probably expand on that a little bit more and see what you can do with the interpersonal relationships between NPCs and the player characters. Probably where I would go, because again, I just don't know how much you can really innovate with the actual gameplay. Mm-hmm.
And I think too, it comes down to a lot of what I want as well. I want to see more, I guess, immersiveness, kind of building off what you say too, because a lot of that comes with, and I think that's just in general what we're going to see more and more as these open world or narrative heavy experiences come along, that, I think in the same time, more things like relationships with NPCs, interactiveness with environments and I think too, I think really Elden Ring kind of nailed that off already, that you see very minimal load times between various portions of maps. You're going through, and granted, Souls games and From Software games in general have usually been very good about load times, and I kind of quote very good because it's all hardware dependent for a lot of that too. But traditionally, they've been pretty well with, minimal load times going through different areas, because they're also wanting to, understanding you're probably going to die a lot. You're going to need to, load back in a lot that alone, and that's going to take some time. That, any way that we can make, and granted, much more linear games, but we can slow down that ability to need and hide some of those load times behind just animations and things like that. We're going to do that. But I think Elden Ring was a good step in that right direction to do so, in terms of, hey, we're going to, you're going to go into 10 different areas just within this, 1 mile radius, 1 square mile right here. And you're not going to experience any load times unless you're getting, you're fast traveling or something like that. You're not. And we haven't really seen that with a lot of open world games of that scale yet. And to me, that's what really excites me about the idea of, a new Witcher coming. Because even then, CDPR was pretty good about that with The Witcher, that, yeah, you did have some, load times that you were going to get, but a lot of, times when you're going into towns and you're going into different areas of maps, you are just walking right into houses. And sure, sometimes you'll load into cutscenes and stuff like that, and while you're getting this in-game cutscene, you're also going to get loading in the background of the game for, whatever's going to be coming next, within the game. But at the same time, too, I want to see more ways that we can mirror that from a tech, now that we have greater tech that's available on consoles, which is your base for the most part. And obviously PC is your most scalable piece of technology that you're getting. But now that we have more of a much better baseline for console players, especially with, the Series X and the PS5, I want to see what they can do with that immersion level. That, hey, we want seamlessness with your, exploration in open world games. We want you to be able to customize things on the go. We want to be able to do, near instantaneous fast traveling. It's things like that that I really want to see what CDPR can do, especially having Unreal, especially being able to, at that point, bring on people who not only have a ton of experience with the tech at hand already, but also to have people who are, or have a whole community behind that too, that they can pull from. People have tons of experience, not only from their community of fans and modders and things like that, but fans who have been modding games within Unreal, and those have been working on, in general with the Unreal Engine from a development standpoint for a long time, that they're able to just kind of pull from right away. So it's really exciting for me from that end, and I think that's what this generation in general is going to be kind of defined by. Obviously, getting more into the weeds with The Witcher, I personally am hoping we get more, and I think it's kind of like what we talked about at the top of the show, but I think we're going to see more of, I don't think this is going to be a Geralt story. I'm hoping, personally, it's going to be more of a series story. But then again, at the same time, I can't remember what series, I mean, I don't want to obviously spoil anything, because I think a lot of people are going to go back and play these games now, and obviously you too, Mike, you have an interest in playing this game, so I don't want to obviously spoil anything. But both have endings to their stories in some degree, that you'll be able to, go off and do something with either character, but there's clearly an end to Geralt's story, especially if you play the DLCs of The Witcher 3. There's clearly an end to Geralt's story that I think gives that character the ability to feel fresh if brought back later in a new saga of games, or reintroduced, or have as almost like, a duo of characters that I think a lot of people can see some loose relation to, with these characters, is Joel and Ellie from The Last of Us, where you did see Joel become more of this support character from moments in that game. And where I could see that becoming useful for Geralt in that situation, because the player has had so much time with him. We know this character in and out, but it's nice to sometimes step back from those characters, give them a chance to breathe, and hold that back, because they can be more impactful when they come back. So I'm hoping we see something like that, and we see more of Ciri's story fleshed out, because the lore behind her character is so interesting. Or just in general, I would love to see something about the first Witcher school and the first group of Witchers that kind of center around. And somebody who's, starting to read the books and stuff like that, like, it's fascinating how much lore is here, and lore is being able to, that you could pull from and really make their own, because not only are the books, the movies, and the games all, pretty different from each other. I don't want to say pretty different, but they all take inspiration from each other in some regard. Obviously, more so the movies and the game from the books, but I'm really excited to see where they go in some directions with some of the things that haven't been touched yet within the book, and just the lore in general of The Witcher, because it's just so ripe to the picking that they can take from. It's almost like The Elder Scrolls, where, this is a series that now has 20 plus years of lineage that you could fucking pull from whatever. There's so many nooks and crannies of that you could pull from. And same with like Star Wars and things like that. Like, that's what excites me so much about these long-standing IPs that I have such a connection to, that, it's kind of like what a lot of people are talking about with the Batman right now. And I personally love the movie. I personally thought one of the characters that people have a issue with showing up in the movie, I agree with those, but at the same time, I'm always interested in seeing, hey, what kind of iteration are you going to give me of this character? What kind of, take on the lore are you going to give me with this? Because I'm interested in seeing, art's all interpretive, and interpretation is supposed to be used not only in the sense of, oh, it's how I take this in, but also how I reciprocate it too. Like, I want to see what people take from, I love that they took inspiration in the Batman from The Long Halloween and, Year Zero, and even a lot of the New 52 in general. Like, to me, as a Batman fan and a comic fan, like, I was happy about that they were able to pull from that lore, but also do something totally unique with it too. And that's what I'm really hoping for out of The Witcher and these long-standing IPs, but obviously for the show this week, specifically The Witcher. But anywho, Mike, I think that'll do it for our episode this week. So why don't you tell people where they could find you on the internet, talk about everything we talked about with The Witcher today, and video games in general. Where can people find you on the interwebs to talk about all of it?
Yeah, you can find me where the Bluebird sings on TOYSXLDIER. That's Toy Soldier, but the second O is an X. Or you can find me on Twitch at MP_Toy Soldier.
Shout out to Adam Marsh. Pour one out for him. He ain't dead. He just ain't here. But as always, I'm your host, Travis White, aka Travelus, on most internet platforms, including at Travelus_ on Twitter. That's TRAVLESS_. You can also find me streaming on twitch.tv/Travelus_. Same as Twitter. I've been doing more streams lately, so hop on over. I'm interested in getting obviously back into some Destiny on stream. I've been doing some Elden Ring streams, but I kind of want to dig into maybe doing a series playthrough. I've been itching maybe to do an Arkham series playthrough. I don't know if I'll actually do that, but I've also been kind of slowly wanting to get back into doing another replay of The Witcher, like yet another one. So that may even end up on there. Who the fuck knows? But anywho, yeah, go over there. Check me out on twitch.tv/Travelus_. We will have all kinds of fun and whatnot. And if you want to play some video games with me, you can do so over just regular old Travelus on pretty much every platform, but specifically Xbox Live at just regular old Travelus. That's TRAVLESS. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has been your newest episode of the Gamecast, your weekly go-to podcast for all things Xbox, Game Pass, and of course PC gaming, including news, rumors, and conversations around them damn good video games. You can catch new episodes of the show when they drop each and every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all other major podcast services. So be sure to subscribe to us, rate us, and review us wherever you get a podcast at. And if we're not on there, let me know. I'll get us on there. And follow us on Twitter at GPGC Podcast to stay up to date with everything regarding the show, video games like, and our dope giveaways. And Mike, that's going to do it for our episode this week. Thank you everyone so much for joining us this week, being part of our growing community. So game on, wash your hands, listen to the doctors, Black Lives Matter, and we will see you next week.